So in this video, we're going to review several PDFs, and I'm going to show you those PDFs first. So we're going to be going over dopamine in food, the microbiome PDF, fiber and sugar, and the BDNF PDF. So dopamine in food. This is where we talk about the hyperpalatable foods. We give you the book called The Dorito Effect, and something fun that you may not have known, if you've ever heard of an fMRI machine, so it's a brain scan machine, and what they do whenever they create foods is you can go confirm or deny or think whatever you want, do your own research on this, but they put people in machines, they feed them foods, and they try to mimic cocaine in their brain. They're trying to make the sugary foods more addictive than drugs. And there's like a fun joke where if you take a person who's addicted to sugar and you take a person who's addicted to drugs and you say, all right, let's see which one can quit drugs faster or sugar faster. That study doesn't exist, but unfortunately it might be unethical to like pump a person and make them type 2 diabetic to where they're reliant on sugar to the point where they might die if they don't eat sugar, or drug a person to the point where they have a reliance on drugs and they've created an addiction. Obviously not ethical, but what you're going to realize when you read this book and you look into these research papers about sugary foods, fatty foods, you start to recognize your ice creams have sugars and fats in them. They say, and your brain's just firing off like the 4th of July. What happens is when you consume these hyperpalatable foods, you get a dopamine response from it. And then obviously that's like your first experience consuming the foods. The second time you consume the foods, you would consume more of the foods because you're not going to get that same response every single time you do it. It's like when you first start working out at the gym. First time you do yoga, your shit hurts. But then eventually you have to increase the weight to be able to tear the muscles. With yoga, when you start stretching, it hurts really bad. A lot of people don't want to do it. You're like, why am I in so much pain from stretching? But the more you stretch, the more you become acclimated with it. So same thing with like dopamine in food. Your hyperpalatable foods, that is like 90% of the grocery store just spiking your dopamine levels to the freaking moon, and then you become addicted to these foods. The gut microbiome craves them. That's why we have the microbiome on there. Like, mind your gut and you keep your mind. But if all you do are eat super hyperpalatable foods that trigger your dopamine, well, yeah, that's why you eat the whole entire bag and you're like, oh, dang, where's the rest? You go in for some chips and there's no chips left. You were sitting there unconsciously devouring an entire bag of Doritos. So here's an example of a food that's filled with a butt ton of ingredients. And when you're looking at dopamine and your food, this is why we gave you the Dorito effect. Now when you start looking at ingredients lists of foods on the grocery shelf, you see something that looks like this, yeah, it's going to taste really good, but it's not good for you. So when you start to pay attention to the ingredients lists on the foods at the grocery stores, this is a general bag of almonds. You can see that the ingredients are just almonds. And then this is a bag of almonds that is covered in salt. And if you get general almonds and you pour salt on those almonds, it's not going to magically stick to the almonds. You'd have to like soak it in water if you were trying to do something with it. But you can see they add vegetable oil just to make the salt stick. And that's where it creates palatability. So your oils, your salts, and your sugars are what you pay attention to. And this is where they're combining the oils and the salts. And the reason they're using the oils, specifically these ones, doesn't really matter. But you're going to notice your canola, your sunflower, and your safflower oil on almost every freaking thing known to man in the grocery store. But they're using that just so they can get the sea salt on there. And then you come across the holy grail of foods, which is actually not this. You think this is a lot of ingredients? When you look at cheesecake, you might think that cheesecake wins for the most ingredients in a food. But the winner of most ingredients, like, I have so much to say about this, but I'm not going to say anything, is your frozen dinners. This is insane. Do you see how many ingredients are right here? It's absolutely nuts. So now when you think about food, you have to realize that every single one of these ingredients is specifically designed in here to make something taste like food. Like, I don't even understand how this is food. The gravy is made up of water, food starch modified, onion powder, salt, monosodium glutamate, caramel Keller, corn syrup solids, and a beef-based flavor yeast extract. That's just the gravy. It's insane. So let's finish up this page right here with the dopamine in food. If you're going to eat something that has a ton of ingredients in it, it is going to spike your dopamine levels. You're going to enjoy the food, and if you consume enough of that food, you will begin to build a dopamine feedback loop with a reward system where you're rewarding yourself by eating these types of food. This is where it all began. Like, think about the Snickers, right? Oh, hungry? Eat a Snickers. Because when a lot of people get hungry, we'll talk about that in the fasting PDFs, but when a lot of people get hungry, they get hypoglycemic, they get angry. Like, irritability is a very normal part of that. So they use the actual science, like, oh, hungry, eat a Snickers. No, if you're hungry, don't eat a Snickers. My God, never eat a Snickers. Like, if you're hungry, you might need to learn about intermetabolic switching so you can understand that your mitochondria are just trying to use fat as fuel, and you've never used fat as fuel before, so the brain's like, how do I use my belly as fuel? And it's a very normal process, but it's very uncomfortable if you don't understand it. So not knowing, okay, I'm addicted to food, that's why we have the meditation modules, because if you're truly addicted to something where you have a feedback loop created where you absolutely must consume, we'll just use Flamin' Hot Cheetos because it took me about 9 months to stop eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos after even knowing that I shouldn't consume them anymore. They are one of the hardest things to break. I'm talking bags every single day. And then you slowly, maybe like one every couple days, and you're like, I'm doing good, and then you relapse, and then you eat like 9 bags. It's very normal. But when you're trying to go from eating foods that have a crap ton of ingredients to foods that have absolutely zero response on your dopamine, if anything, you're eating them and you're like, ugh, this tastes terrible. That's the opposite of dopamine. You're not even going to want to be in that moment. Every chew you can feel in your mouth. When I first started eating things that I never ate that I knew I needed to eat because I was like, okay, genomically I need this nutrition, I'm able to eat these foods, this one's healthier, this is what the dietitian says to do. Just eating things that were just disgusting tasting. So dopamine in food is very important to understand. Read the Dorito effect and look into the research papers. On to the next PDF. So microbiome. This is where we create the phrase called mind your gut and keep your mind. And we're going to use this food right here as an example for the microbiome. Let's say that you got the mind-gut connection, grain-brain, 10% human. At this point in time, look at these books, read these research papers. The phrase to mind the guts, to preserve the mind, to mind the guts, to keep the mind, however you want to look at it, a lot of research is pointing to the belly being the brain. And when we gave you Habits of a Happy Brain, or the mind-gut connection, these two books are going to help you understand the connection between the belly and the brain. Where if you eat something and you have a stomach ache, you're not trying to go out and have the best day of your life because you have a stomach ache and you feel sick and you're laying in bed because you feel like crap. So the belly signals to the brain, and the brain is just the conscious perception center. Like, how you feel is dependent on your gut. That's why when anybody ever does a fast, they start to feel better. Because if they were feeding themselves these types of foods that are high in ingredients, like 70 plus ingredients, all of those ingredients are going to interact with the gut microbiome. They're all going to produce their own cascade of responses for you to experience. Some people it's diarrhea tomorrow. Some people it's acid reflux. Some people get a headache. All these common health problems could easily be avoidable if you start to reinoculate your gut microbiome. And just to give you an example of it, we had a person reinoculate their gut. They got off depression meds, anxiety meds, stress meds, and they could sleep for the first time in their life. So Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker will be mentioned, I'm sure, in this document somewhere. It's actually mentioned in the book part where you read the books. So if we use this as an example of something that a person consumes, which we can draw a line over here, this is going to produce roughly 70 different possible reactions inside of your body. And you're feeding your guts all of these random ingredients, which are definitely not good for any sort of diversity building. This is just going to be like a bomb going off in your stomach. And whatever happens next is what happens next. So if you look at like the American diet, these types of foods being a part of everybody's diets, all of the common health problems that we're having, the mental health crisis, you'll start to get a clear understanding of how the microbiome actually affects the brain. But in this document, we mentioned the 50 brain cell challenge. This food right here is an example of something that you would never consume because it fails the 50 brain cell challenge. And this, for another reason, I should probably say this, if a person has a really bad diet where they have no uniform foods that they're consuming on a consistent basis, like for instance, if your diet was a bunch of random food and you try the vegan diet, you might think that that's the accurate diet. You're like, wow, I feel great. Because you're eating a consistent amount of food and you're allowing the gut to kind of balance itself out, where it's not one day massive die off because we're eating, stuff like this. Next day we're eating a little bit better today. And then, 2 days from now we just go back to massive amounts of garbage. There's a lot of reasons why people have issues with their gut, and 99% of them are because they're just consuming the wrong foods that do not in any way, shape, or form ferment, and they just sit in your colon and you're just feeling terrible. But a lot of people that go like the carnivore diet, which any dietitian I've ever ran into says, no, why would anybody do that? That's a terrible idea. And then you can see some of the videos I've created where you'll have a doctor that's trained in nutrition that tells you not to eat beans because between 1976 and 1983, people got food poisoning from not cooking their food. Like, that's the type of mind-blowing stuff. So with choosing a diet, it's going to bring sustainability to your life, which bringing sustainability to your gut microbiome community is very important. Most important thing you can do is get your gut microbiome fixed. And what I mean by fixing it is, like, figure it out. We got testing. This is the information here that you can read through. You can only do so much without actually looking at where your current composition of your gut microbiome is. And there is no accurate diet. We've worked with people that are vegan, that are having a ton of different problems. We've worked with people that are on every diet under the sun. And you start to recognize, based on a person's gut, person's blood, person's lifestyle, person's genomics, there is a diet plan that best supports each individual. But just a general takeaway, if you're consuming something that has 70 ingredients in it, you are messing up your gut microbiome. It is not good for you. And check this part out. Found it. You'll know in a lot of the videos that I have on my website, I like to look at books, research papers, some Google Qs, so people can go ahead and do their own research to kind of make sure, is this person telling me the truth? Or is this like another one of those people that are trying to convince me that something's bad that's not actually bad? You can see a basic Google right here about foods that infect the gut microbiome. Got polysorbate 80, sucralose is in so many different things, aspartame, artificial coloring. So all of these impact the gut microbiome. And then when you start looking at foods, you're like, dang, everything has artificial coloring in it. So many things have sucralose and artificial coloring in it. And this is where it's damaging the lining in your gut. So your gut barrier is one cell thick. And if you're damaging that gut barrier, you're allowing things into your body. And this is where we can even give you another book. This one's called An Elegant Defense, and then Sicker, Fatter, Poorer. Those are two more books that you can look at to see why is it that everybody that's on the government assistant food programs can't get any of the healthy options. It's always the crappier options. Like, it is. Once you see this, you will never be able to unsee these things. So the easiest and final takeaway, since we have dopamine in food and we have the gut microbiome, if you're consuming something that has a large amount of ingredients, it's going to spike your dopamine. It's very normal. They're designed that way. But it's also going to increase the likelihood of having negative adverse effects on your gut microbiome health. And if you consume the normal foods that don't have a bunch of dopamine-based properties, your gut microbiome's not going to get messed up. So over the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, which direction in life do you want to go? Do you want to progress forward correctly, or do you want to consume a bunch of dopamine-based foods because they make you say, that smells great? Which, if you ever wonder why pizza smells the way pizza smells, just look at the ingredients in pizza. There you go. Hyperpalatable. Alright, so now we know about dopamine foods, and you're going to realize these foods that have a ton of ingredients lack dietary fiber. So they're usually devoid of fiber, and they usually have salts, oils, sugars, and a mix of those in the food itself. Now, when we're looking at understanding the glycemic wave, this is where we give you the book called Fiber Fueled, so you can understand a little bit more about fiber. We're giving you links to research with fiber and diabetes, understanding gastrointestinal problems that people have from not consuming enough fiber. There will be a stool chart, the Bristol stool chart, where you're going to be, there's going to be a video where I'm like, this is how you poop, because I poop the wrong way my entire life. and many people don't look at their poop after they poop, which you should look at your poop after you poop, because your poop is a very big indicator whether or not you're absorbing nutrients properly. So, like, yeah, I get it. Ew, poop. No, like, oh no, my poop is the wrong color. Something must be wrong. Let me go get help before I die. Very normal. So, fiber and sugar. Easiest way to understand what's happening with this, and then there's going to be a brain-derived neurotrophin factor. When you consume food, okay, obviously your blood sugar is going to be where your blood sugar is at. If you fast, you're going to deplete your glycogen stores. You're going to be in your fat-burning state. So above this line is your sugar, and below this line is just a fasted state. Okay, and for fiber and sugar, you're not going to be entering a fasted state. Just want to give you a parallel here so you can see above this line is a state of sugar, below this line is a state of no sugar. But what we have to explain with fiber and sugar is very, very, very simple, because I didn't understand this at one point in my life. Same thing with the hyperpalatable foods, same thing with the gut microbiome, the possibilities to impact our gut microbiome in a negative way. When we consume food, if we do not include dietary fiber in the sugar that we're consuming, the release of glucose into the blood goes like this, just straight up. It is just absolutely, there is nothing slowing down the glucose from getting into the blood. It's going boom, pumping into your cells. And this is where, we'll talk about the type 2 diabetes, but this is your average cell. And then if somebody's just pumping sugar into that cell, what happens to that cell is it closes itself up. It can't absorb the sugar anymore. But then people are still absorbing sugar, and it can't get into the cell, spills out. That's where it turns into extra fat. That's why they give people insulin, because then this would be your cell filled with sugar. You can't get any more sugar in, so then they're going to give you insulin and then open up your cell to put more sugar in. So, like, the whole natural reversal of type 2 diabetes is one of the most important things to look into. So now when you consume food, what I want you to pay attention to are the grams of dietary fiber. And it's going to be staggering. 25 to 50 grams is like the area of consumption for people. It's different for men than it is for women. But 25 to 50 grams of dietary fiber. When I used to look at the diet that I would consume, I'd be like, 1 gram? Maybe 3 grams, because I'd eat the whole bag of chips that had like 0.5 grams of dietary fiber, or less than 1 gram. That's the only dietary fiber I'd be getting. So when we're looking at this, all you have to do is pay attention that you don't want your blood sugar to spike out of control. And there will be books that we talk about with blood sugar spiking out of control and people experiencing anxiety. So with fiber and sugar, like, you ever chomped down on a meal and felt like you just devoured an entire house, and now you're sitting there narcoleptic on the couch like a truck hit you? Yeah. Eat yourself a tub of ice cream, because you can eat a tub of ice cream. But then try to eat a potato that has a very strong satiety signal, and it's going to make you feel like you're full. And this is where with hyperpalatable foods, you don't feel like you're full. You're just sitting there, yum, 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 eating the whole thing. I promise you, I could devour an entire tub of ice cream. I could finish an entire large piece of pizza. I could finish an entire family box of cereal and a gallon of milk. I'm sure other people can do it too. And if you're the type of person that was actually healthy at one point in your life and you're like, ooh, who would ever do that? Me. Lots of people. So pay attention to the fiber you get when you consume your sugars. And one thing to pay attention to is after you work out, it's processed differently in your body. Like, you will be able to absorb the sugars, you'll be able to absorb like your 30-minute protein window. So what we want you to understand here is just a simple meta-analysis between dietary fiber and diabetes. And read the book called Fiber Fueled. In the last introductory piece, there's going to be a lot of research on this one, because this is something that I didn't really know about. And at the very end of all this, you're going to see a gigantic wall that looks like a crazy person wrote on it. It's going to have a ton of information that's going to break down a research paper that I reverse engineered called The Hidden Mechanics of Depression. And this is where I found like brain-derived neurotrophin factor. I'm like, what's this? BDNF? My brain can keep growing after 25. I thought that thing was done cooking. I mean, it's not like my brain really grew at all. But BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophin factor, neurogrowth factors in your brain. This is a test that your doctor's never going to do for you, by the way. So that's why we gave you a short guide to a long life. This is a person who's going to tell you how to quiz your doctor. Like, oh, we could have ran this test for you 5 years ago to find out if something was wrong, but now something's wrong, so I guess we're going to have to put you on meds till you die. America. Some along the lines of that. But then the rest of these research papers are going to show you ways to increase your brain-derived neurotrophin factor. And as we've given you before, hyperpalatable foods, yum yum, you're going to consume a crap ton of sugar with that. There's no fiber to slow down your glucose. You're messing up the gut microbiome. And now we're getting into something that may convince you to pay attention to your fiber when you consume. So the higher level of blood sugar in your body, the lower levels of brain-derived neurotrophin factor. They're correlative. So once again, if we can have a Miracle-Gro protein in our brain and optimize for brain growth, this will help our brain mature faster than the average human being. Why would we not want to optimize for that? So the very first thing we want to introduce you to with these few PDF pages is just a better understanding. It's the easiest thing to add to your life. Just pay attention to how much fiber you're getting in a day. Be very careful how you consume your fiber, because you'll feel like you have to shit your pants. Not even kidding. Like, you'll have to poop. Stop watching if you're not okay with me talking about poop. I don't want to go into this. Takeaway from this video was just eat more fiber. Now for everybody else, just to describe what it's going to be like, you'll start breathing out of the other side. And maybe you're just consuming too much fiber, so trust me on this one. Slowly introduce your fiber to yourself. And that's not like these fiber drinks that you can consume. Like, get fiber from food, and then you'll know what's going to happen when you go to the toilet. Just be very careful with increasing your fiber. Don't do it all at once. Don't go from, I used to be consuming 5 grams of fiber to 50 grams of fiber. You better wear a diaper, to say the least. But brain-derived neurotrophin factor levels in sugar. This is where fasting comes into play. This is where you look at sugar, IGF-1, body grow, brain slow. In the presence of sugar, your brain-derived neurotrophin factor can't go through the roof, but your blood sugar can. So what I want you to pay attention to on this is up here is sugar, and down here is your BDNF. And that is why we linked over here, restricted caloric intake is beneficial for brain-derived neurotrophin factor production. And we do have other PDFs that we're going to be going over, so make sure you read through them, check out the books, check out the research papers. But we do have the anxiety PDF over here. We have anxiety and depression PDF. That's where it's the research paper, The Hidden Mechanics of Depression. And then we're going to be going over fasting. So a lot of this information is going to connect itself together. But I just want to make sure that you're getting the full takeaway from these PDFs by just kind of telling you, hey, why did I decide to put fiber and sugar, microbiome, hyperpalatable foods, and BDNF all near each other in a PDF that I'm hoping to educate people on the effects of consuming hyperpalatable foods that release your dopamine, that make you feel really good when you eat it, but then you feel like shit 20 minutes later. Like, it is very real and normal. So if you do not feel like you're grasping some of this, that is okay. At the very end, we're going to go through every single PDF. It's going to be probably like a 4-hour long video, but I'm going to map all of this stuff together for you and then give you an outline. Like, I know on the weekends you want to stay up late, you want to spend time with your friends, you want to do stuff, you were just working all week and it was like, ugh, boring job or something like that. Maybe you don't have a boring job, maybe you love your job. But I'm going to go through every single one of these individually just to make sure you grasp the information and knowledge that we're trying to bring to you. And then at the very end, I'm going to go over every single PDF. So we're going to review all 100 of these pages and give you the entire outline to make sure that you have the full takeaway so you're not missing anything. So, appreciate you for watching the video. There should be some more links down below with just some general information. And if you want to go around the website, you're more than welcome to travel around the website. There's a couple pages that have a lot more information on them, just a bunch of free resources, books, research papers, Google Qs for you to be able to learn more. Like, you can think I know nothing, but go ahead and learn from the research, and I promise you I'm just pointing you in the direction of books and research papers that I've learned and applied to my life, and they've worked. Like, I don't care if it's rat research about not eating food. Don't eat food for like 20 days and tell me something didn't change in your brain. So I appreciate you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.